There are very few series in any form of media that combine music and storytelling as seamlessly as Samurai Champloo. And that isn't just a stylistic choice, it is the foundation of how the series moves. Because in Samurai Champloo, music is not background detail. It is structure, it is rhythm, it is pacing. And at the center of that identity is the music of Nujabes. What Nujabes brings to Samurai Champloo is not simply a soundtrack, but a kind of emotional language that the visuals learn to speak. His compositions do not just accompany scenes, they reshape them. A fight scene becomes less about impact and more about flow. A journey across open land becomes less about travel and more about atmosphere. Even silence feels intentional, because it exists between musical phrases, rather than outside them. Nujabes' style, built on soft jazz sampling, lo-fi hip-hop textures, and restrained melodic progression, creates a constant sense of movement without urgency. It is music that breathes rather than pushes, and that breathing rhythm directly influences how the series is edited and experienced. This is where the fusion becomes important. Edo period Japan, with its strict social structures and historical weight, is placed against a soundtrack that feels modern, fluid, and improvisational. On paper, that contrast should create distance. Instead, it creates continuity, because Nujabes' music does not modernize the setting, it emotionalizes it. It turns historical space into something reflective, almost dreamlike. The past is no longer distant or rigid, it becomes something you can move through emotionally, and that is why the tone works. Action scenes are not driven purely by escalation, they are shaped like tracks, built on rhythm, interruption, and return. A sword swing lands not just with force, but with timing. A pause between movements feels like a beat drop that hasn't happened yet. Even character identity becomes musical. Mugen feels chaotic, unpredictable, like syncopation that refuses to settle into a single pattern. Jin feels controlled, precise, like a structured melody that resists disruption. Fu becomes the grounding rhythm that keeps both from drifting too far apart. Altogether, they exist like instruments in the same composition, rather than characters following a shared plot. What makes Nujabes especially important here is restraint. His music never overwhelms the scene. It doesn't dictate emotion in an obvious way. Instead, it leaves space for the viewer to interpret feeling rather than forcing it. That restraint mirrors the series itself. Samurai Champloo is never maximalist for its own sake. Even in its most stylized, it understands when to step back and let atmosphere carry meaning. And because of that, the collaboration between animation and music feels less like layering and more like convergence, as if the series and the soundtrack were always meant to exist in the same rhythm. What Samurai Champloo ultimately proves is that storytelling does not belong solely to dialogue or plot. Sometimes it belongs to tempo, to beat, to silence between notes, and in that space is where Nujabes' music lingers longest. That is where the series truly lives. And that is what it takes to be great.